discussing practical tips for strength and conditioning coaches that want to work in the AFL. So bear with me. This is our second time um, that I'm doing this recording. Unfortunately, the first time there was no audio. So I just want to do a quick audio check. Yep. Okay. Perfect. So, quick announcements before I get into the key topics for today's chat. Firstly, I've just uploaded 30 plus new acceleration and plyometric drills to improve your power, but also coaching cues in the Academy membership. So, make sure to check out the exercise library for those new demonstrations and be able to practice those if you're a footballer in your next warm up or speed session. But also for coaches that are in the Coaches Academy, you can see my favorite coaching cues and drills for improving acceleration and plyometric stiffness drills. We've got a Zoom party coming up. So this is not only for Academy members, but everyone that's on our email list will have access to our Zoom link for our next Get Better Plan live coaching call. I'll be presenting a recent presentation I did for ASCA on the AFL reconditioning role. So make sure to, if you're not on our email list, to join our email list via our website, preparelikeapro.com. And of course, it's going to be first in, best dressed. It's 4 p.m. next Tuesday, which is the 20th of February. So make sure to jump in on our email there. If you haven't got access to the link because you joined late, just direct message me and I'll send you the Zoom link. It'll be first in, best dressed, the first 100 attendees. And then after the presentation, more than happy to answer any questions. And then our next live high performance interview will be with Nick Poulos, the head of performance at the GWS Giants. He's been in the industry for a very long time, so looking forward to chatting with him all things performance, which will be 4 p.m. the 21st. That's on Wednesday, 21st of February. So make sure to tune in for that live chat. Okay, so I've broken it down into 6 key areas that AFL strength and conditioning coaches need to be well equipped with, in my experience, to make an impact with athletes that are working at the highest level. And they are energy system development, obviously breaking it down from aerobic point of view and anaerobic, running efficiency, both in slow running, high speed running, and very high speed running, your strength and power to help with contest side of the game, stiffness to help with your efficiency and your ping to be able to, whether it be help with activities like jumping, cutting, acceleration, your agility, both from a reactive point of view, but also your change of direction technique for things like open step, crossover step, of course, excel, decel, and power cutting. Your game speed, which I've broken down into your ability to accelerate over 5 meters, your deceleration, stop on a dime, and of course your sprinting ability, but also in context of the game, so your ability to disassociate shoulders and hips, whether it be in a handball chain to receive a handball at speed where it's coming from behind, but also for things like picking up a ground ball and accelerating away from the contest as well. And having a technical model with those key areas is critical. So I'll talk about the importance of analyzing and then that influencing your cues with the athlete, the drill selection, and then, of course, how often you should reanalyze to see if your program is working. Ultimately, I think if you're doing a good job as strength and conditioning high performance staff, you're improving the confidence of your playing list because they've got better capacities, i.e., they're lifting more weight in the gym, they're running faster, they're accelerating more efficiently. They can see through video analysis that their technique is better in agility, speed, and acceleration. And you're improving things like their 2K time trial and their general ability to handle back-to-back sessions over pre-season, so their resilience. And of course, they're going to have soreness, but you're mitigating risk of injury, so their ability to handle pre-season and go into an in-season unscathed with little to no setbacks from missing games from injuries. That's ultimately the big rock for S&C. So we'll go into breaking down in a little bit more detail those key 6 areas. So energy system development. I've actually got a pre-season template in our academy, so make sure if you haven't already joined. I'm happy for all podcast listeners to get a free 30-day trial. So hit me up if you haven't had that 30-day trial, and I'll send you a coupon link. I've got a spreadsheet laid out over a pre-season that I did at a community level sport, but you could also apply that at semi-pro sport as well. So anyone if you're training your football club 2 or 3 times a week, and they're mainly doing their work on the field, you've got little access to the gym. That spreadsheet can come really handy from a load management point of view, conditioning prescription from aerobic and repeat speed and sprinting, as well as some agility drills as well. But you want to understand the player's demands. How does the coach want the team playing? Are they going to be a real high speed, hard running defensive unit? Or are they going to be more a contest, um, acceleration, speed sort of team? So and that chaos. So understanding how they're going to want to play, and then ultimately putting in your program to add in a little bit extra. But your 80 to 90% should be preparing them to be able to ultimately run out a game, which is they're going to need aerobic work and they're going to need anaerobic work. So watch games, look at the GPS reports if you have access to them, and speak to coaches and analysts to get an understanding of how that player, what their strengths are, what their role demands, and then you can start to individualize that if you have the opportunity to at your club. Big rocks when it comes to aerobic development. I like 3 to 1, so like a 90-second effort into a 30-second walk. You'll do that for about 6 to 8 minutes, typically 45 on, 15 off. That's another good template. And then having an objective measure, so they're not just running subjectively, but they've actually got a target set out. So you set out a cone, work out their for aerobic development, working out around 90% of their maximal aerobic speed. If you've done a 2K time trial, you can work that out. I've also got a MAS spreadsheet in the academy as well. So if you need one, jump in there. And if you have any questions, just hit me up. Anaerobic work, obviously we want to give them more rest because it's higher intensity. So we want to respect that. We want that quality of work. So typically 1 to 2 or even 1 to 3, depending on how long the duration of the rep is. 4 to 6 reps per set. 12 to 40 seconds of work to be able to develop their lactate threshold, and that the intensity prescribed to be objective with that would be they're at their MAS pace, so 100% of their testing pace, and then they take into account their max velocity to work out their anaerobic speed reserve, and I'll program plus 25% on top of their MAS. Anywhere up to 30% of their MAS. So you're moving quite fast. Some athletes were moving 6 meters per second with those two considerations. Moving into running efficiency, we want to be looking at side-on view, rear view, and front-on to look for things like the technical model that I discussed. I like to see with their foot contacts with the ground, is that relatively close to underneath their center of mass? Is it quite a toe contact? Is it quite a heel contact? Or is it more around the midfoot? Hip and shoulders, are they dropping, rotating excessively? And you can see that with the front on, rear on view. And then also their heel recovery, their backside mechanics, which you can see quite well with their rear view. To improve their efficiency with these, obviously running slow, anywhere under 4.5 minutes per second for most AFL athletes would be running at a steady pace, and then below that a jogging pace. You're not going to be using a lot of constraints around the drills in terms of like wickets and cones and adding extra perturbation tools, because it is quite a low stiffness required. There's not as much pre-tension that we need for that type of running, but we do want some tension. So that's where you working on cadence can be really important, using video so they're not sloppy through the ankle, and that's where dribbling from ankle, calf, and knee and bleeding that into a run can work really well when you're warming up and working on the efficiency of athletes. They can feel what it feels like to have still some form of pre-tension going through the body before they're running, and they're not just almost running, not even thinking about it at all, and just that awful plodding type technique that we can see break down, where they've got massive amount of hip drop, their foot's in swing phase is facing the ground, their big toe. So we want to keep those angles up. Of course, we don't need the same attention as the higher activities like hard accelerations and sprinting, but we still want some to maintain good joint angles. So that's where dribbling can be quite helpful. When you are doing very high speed running and sprinting, I love wickets. I think every time I put wickets out and you got a video analysis, you can pretty much see their improvement of efficiency. Foot's underneath the hip, swing leg thigh and stance leg thigh gap is minimal, and they've generally got a pretty good posture. So wickets are great. Obviously, just taking into consideration their stride length and height when setting those up. Straight leg bounds, A skips, and bleeding that into a high speed sprint run are also effective way to get that pre-tension and co-contraction of hammies and hip flexors while building in efficiency going into your higher speed runs. Move over to strength and power. Ultimately, this can be really effective for improving the contest of the team and acceleration. So, if that's something that coaches have identified as important for your team, then you want to make sure you've got a really robust strength and power program. Um, and that you've got the athletes bought into how important it is for their maximal force development and improving for that part of the game. So, exercises that I think are non-negotiables, you want to be squatting heavy or deadlifting heavy, like the trap bar deadlift. You'll be doing anywhere between 4 to 6 sets of low reps, 4 to 6 sets of 3 to 6 reps. And we want to be working at a heavy load, so you might be building them up to like a heavy set of 80% of their max, for example, with good rest in between, typically working every 3 minutes, so they can have good intent, good quality technique, as well as moving those moderate weights fast and explosively. Bench press, weighted chin-ups, and bench pulls would be the same template. Then moving into more your power stuff, I love unilateral power work. Obviously, a lot of the game is unilateral in nature, so step ups, banded step ups, box jumps, single leg box jumps, single leg broad jumps, all that concentric power work, loaded jumps as well to improve their power, and sled march and then sled accelerations can also be really good for developing their ankle stiffness. Moving into resilience, we want to be considering groins, calves, and hamstrings as the big three ticket ovens of games missed due to those soft tissue injuries. And if we put a good program in place, we can mitigate those. So we want to make sure we've got things like barbell RDLs for proximal hamstring, anywhere between 3 to 4 reps of 5 to 8 repetitions with good load. Make sure the feet are underneath the hips, and that you're lifting around mid shin or as long as their hamstrings can allow before their back starts to curve. That's around. Weighted Nordics, 2 to 3 sets of 3 to 5 repetitions to get that peak force, which we can track on the Nord board. But ultimately, we want to try and get as much force as we can eccentrically with those. Single leg RDL or single leg back extensions for unilateral hamstring development, typically 3 sets of 6 to 10 repetitions. Seated calf work, if they're not doing sled marches, for just that ankle stiffness work and targeting the soleus, which we know is highly active in all forms of running and a pretty prevalent injury for AFL footballers. Typically 3 to 6 sets there, or 3 times 20 meters on the sled march. Then Copenhagen's for groins or cable adduction, anywhere between 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 15 repetitions there, to work on obviously your groins and your hip control. Moving over to technology, you want to be well versed with GPS, get understanding of the athlete and your conditioning prescription, and they are fast accelerator. So if they're doing 150-meter reps and they get to that high speed threshold quite early in the rep, then they're going to get more distance per rep from obviously the exposure of that prescription compared to a slower accelerator. You want to have an idea of their output and work rate generally in football drills. This is particularly important when you're looking after reconditioning athletes, where you can be quite individualized in prescription and you're making live decisions on getting them as close to plan A as you can. Force decks for having strong, robust markers to maximize the athletes, both from a stiffness point of view, so drop jumps, single leg drop jumps, but also power, counter movement jumps, to be able to track and monitor your program. Also, I love them for isometric efforts, whether you're trying to do max force over 3 to 5 seconds to see how much force the athlete can generate, and looking at limb to limb. It's like a single leg back squat ISO for more knee biased, or a sprinter calf ISO for that gastro work, or of course seated calf ISO for the soleus, and seeing what the capacity is for those areas, particularly around reconditioning, where we want to see how much force that area that when isolated can generate. And that might mean that the athlete needs a bit more strength work to be able to handle the rigors of running demands and acceleration demands. So yeah, being well versed with force decks, of course, NordBord and force frame to be able to assess hamstring strength and all your hip and groin assessments. From a stiffness point of view, so your plyometric work, which typically we do pre-field, we want to coach the athlete to have pre-tension in the air, so that's stiffness throughout the whole body in the air to maintain good positions, and that way they're not sloppy when they hit the ground. We want quick contacts, hot coals as a great cue to enforce the athlete to be able to generate force as rapidly as possible. You can, if the athlete isn't ready for plyometric work due to a lower limb injury, then you can use rate of force demand ISOs. I found to showing the athlete how quickly, within 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds, they're generating force is a great way to get that stimulus. But typically, if they're doing stiffness work, plyometric work, we want to think vector. Say, is it medial lateral work to improve their agility? Is it horizontal to improve their acceleration? Or is it more your vertical to work on that upright aerial jumping and sprinting tolerance? And then from an amplitude point of view, is it intensive, more activation, repetition, good rhythm, or is it more extensive for maximum force work? So having a good drill framework and also explain to the athlete what we're looking for here. Is it more rhythm-based introduction to plyos, or is it more high force activity that we're looking for? And then last one, game speed, which is a massive one, obviously with the work of Frans Bosch, Jonas Dodu, John Pryor, Dean Benton, these guys. It's quite popular these days. So I break that into 3 different areas, have a technical model with all of them, which you can create over time with experience. You've got your agility with football. We want that open step where we're moving one direction and quickly swivel the hips and shoulders to move another direction without stopping. We want a power cut with the outside leg, ideally, to be able to create as much space away from an opponent. It's quite an offensive movement pattern to get away from space and not get tackled. And without any shuttle, so you can maintain, or shuffling the feet, so you can maintain speed and power cut. Obviously, take into account context and demands. So for forwards, we want to be doing a lot of and defenders, they want to have that disassociation. They can track the ball, track the players that are about to kick the ball, and their shoulders and hips will be facing the player, but their shoulders, will be facing the player, but their hips will be facing in the opposite direction, where they're tracking backwards towards goals, and then they can react and accelerate forwards, where their hips and shoulders both facing the same direction. So understanding the athlete's demands and positions, and where you might want to focus on, like an inside mid, more on stop, start, accel, decel type work. Crossover step, have that weight on the inside leg for your like shuttle-like pattern. So when an athlete is doing like a 90-degree turn, 180 turn, disassociate the hop, hips, shoulders we've discussed. Acceleration, so big ones, athletes or in football, because they're always looking up, will tend to have vertical shins in their acceleration, and they'll strike in front or in line with their center of mass. We want them to strike behind their center of mass with positive shin angles similar to the trunk, so falling forward, so they can generate maximal horizontal force, so pushing back behind them to project their hips forward. So that's really, really important to actually train that, because in Australia we don't do a lot of it unless they've done track and field. So slowing that down, doing it with sleds to get them in those positions and feel those positions, doing it with weighted chains can be a really effective way, and just showing them the video I've found is an effective way to improve those things. Ankle reactivity and switching are 2 of the big things, because the AFL athletes are quite strong. They can project well as long as they're in good positions and they're striking the ground in good positions. So technically working on the reactivity of the ankle, getting minimal heel drop, and switching throughout the air, that limb exchange, rapid limb exchange, and contacting the foot behind the body, but also splitting that opposite swing leg through, so that knees driving out in front. So you're getting that foot from a good stiff foot, so you can be able to strike the ground with force, is really, really important. And then lastly, speed. As I mentioned, we want a minimal thigh gap between the swing leg and the stance leg on ground contact. Typically, we want around that mid-foot connection. Stiff foot, so make sure that the heel the big toes facing forwards as close as you can rather than vertically down. Looking for things like hip drop, which will result in a sloppiness through the hips. So therefore, you're going to spend more time on the ground, which is more muscle work, more strain on the particularly things like soleus. So we want shorter contacts and active hips, nice stable pelvis. So we're efficient in our running pattern, and reducing the amount of total work. And then ultimately, once we've got that technical model working nicely for us, and the athlete's got an awareness of what success feels like, then we want to be able to analyze that fresh, in context. So after a ground ball, accelerating and getting to speed, handball chain, can they do it in the context of their sport? So sprinting with maybe 3 athletes, and doing it in a handball chain fashion, and executing the skill. And then ultimately under fatigue as well. What does the technical model look like when they're under fatigue with lactate throughout the system and high heart rate? And that's it, guys. So, like I mentioned, if you're interested to join our academy, you can see exactly all these things I talked about. I've got new videos popping in every month, so you can see some drills with coaching cues and tips. It's only $20 a month, but I'm happy for podcast listeners to get a free month. Just hit us up, and if you're interested to jump on a performance discovery call, remember I'm offering them for free. 20 minutes. We chat um, exclusively one-on-one about your career and how you can set yourself up as a strength and conditioning coach, whether it be in the next 4 years, map out a goal plan to work in the industry full time, or it might be more recent than that. Maybe you've already accrued some good experiences. You've got ticket to dance, you're qualified, and you really want to try and maximize this year to set yourself for a full contract at the end of the year. Jump on a call with me, jump in my calendar. The link is in the show notes, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.